The Soul Sovereignty podcast is a deep dive into the core wounds and deeply embedded subconscious beliefs that reside within the collective psyche so that you can reclaim your sovereignty and embody your power to experience freedom in your relationships. It is hosted by Jessica Falcon, International Soul Embodiment Guide and Relationship Coach. Visit thepathtosovereignty.com to enter a portal of transformation.
How does past wounding affect your relationships? How does unhealed trauma affect your sexuality? That's what we're going to dive into on today's Soul Sovereignty podcast with myself, Jessica Falcon, and I have a repeat special guest, Sunny G. She's here with us today because we so enjoyed last week's conversation around what is Tantra, the misconceptions of Tantra, the benefits of Tantra. And in that conversation, there were so many different aspects I wanted us to follow up on, specifically how this wounding gets perpetuated. Both Sunny and I see that when trauma is unhealed, it can unconsciously interfere with our ability to experience loving, intimate relationships. And what we both see in the external world, and we'll talk more about this, and I'll introduce Sunny in a second, is that in a lot of the, quote, sexual healing practices in the West, whether it be BDSM or kink, if that shadow work is not being done consciously, it's really just repeating trauma, cycling trauma, and there's no actual healing from that. And it's a touchy subject. It's a deep subject. We're going to try to touch on the deep aspects of this while knowing it's a short conversation and there's so much more to what we're saying. And if you get triggered, good. Use that as an opportunity, because that's why triggers come up, is they are opportunities for us to get really curious and really loving with ourselves. Right, Sunny?
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be with you again. And as we work with women, especially, we see so much trauma going on. I actually had one woman that was going to come to one of my retreats some months ago. And another friend of ours posted something that he has been at a tantra retreat and he had his heart flogged. And I posted, I commented on that I love that he's healing and really exploring this. And I knew what was the practice about. While for her, anything, so we have, I'll give a little caveat before I finish the story. We have some people that just hear heart flogging and they're like, oh my God, this is dirty BDSM.
What is heart flogging?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But she just got so triggered. She's like, I don't want to go to your retreat if this is what Tantra is. So that's why we are also clearing paths on what Tantra is and what those healing practices are. But you have the one camp that are not even hearing what Tantra is, and they're like, oh my God, this is dirty, I don't want it. We have the other camp that go healing through BDSM, through tying up, through all of those practices that show up that can be healing.
And maybe we should also define BDSM if you want to throw that in there too.
Right. I know all the topics are coming up. So basically, what I want to start with is that there is enormous amount of misconception, and yet a lot of people either don't even are so blocked that they don't want to enter the Tantra world, and maybe don't even know where to enter, which is very important. And the other ones that are going full on into all the, like we said, and you will help me define the BDSM healing and opening your mind and everything and exploration, and they're getting actually re-traumatized. So as we define those two, let's first, I'll give it to you to define what is BDSM and how it is maybe in Tantra, and what are people trying to do with this?
Well, I want to start by saying the discernment of entering the world of Tantra or healing is essential, actually, because I myself, even though I've been trained in Egyptian Tantra, even though I am in a lineage of deep, deep soul Tantra, of that inner union, that divine union, which make sure you listen to last week's episode to understand what we mean when we talk about Tantra, because both Sunny and I have a very unique perspective of Tantra that's rooted in love and isn't about even necessarily being with a partner, being with another. It's not limited to sex, because sexuality is your own life force energy, and it's not dependent on another person. Huge part of what I teach is sexual sovereignty and sacred sexuality. And that is an aspect of Tantra. And the discernment is necessary precisely because when we talk about these other practices, what we're referring to are practices where violence might be involved, where domination and submission might be involved, where some people are harmed or hurt intentionally to create, quote, pleasure, where often these are because someone has already had their heart cut off from their womb and their sexual centers due to trauma. And it is then, rather than healing and reuniting these energy centers, it is repeating that cycle of disconnection, dissociation from the body. Now, I'm not saying that there can't be benefits of working with the shadow consciously, but if it's not being done with love as the healing balm, then we're just repeating trauma, because trauma is the lack of love. Trauma is the result of the lack of love. When the soul is not recognized, when there's disconnection, dissociation, when you're not being seen and you're being used against your will, for example. And so if we're allowing these things to continue without consciously navigating them through the lens of the heart and through the lens of love, we're keeping ourselves locked in cycles of separation, and trauma is separation. And so I get very passionate about this. And so, and that's why we wanted to have this conversation, because if you're skeptical of the world of Tantra, good, I am too. I am very skeptical of that world in the West, especially because it is so misunderstood. It is so misused. And most people aren't doing the level of shadow work, aren't helping people actually heal the core wound of these things. And so that being said, Sunny, let's talk about how this wounding shows up, what this trauma, how this trauma affects the relationships and sexuality, because I know you've witnessed it in your own experience as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. With basically all the women I work with, this is what is showing up. And how it happens is really in childhood, what we received as love, and oftentimes it's really not that pure, loving thing that we get from our caregivers. And we learn that either love has to be earned, either love hurts. And this is what we have learned about love, and this is what we keep repeating. So, for example, in a recent retreat, as I was mentioning, there was a lot of women who were in a mixed environment. So especially when you put men and women together and you start doing the practices, oh boy, all the triggers and all the trauma come up. That's why Jessica and I highly recommend that you first do, we work mostly with women, first do your women's healing, the goddess essence retreats, the soul work that you do. Just because we it's so much easier to find ourselves first in a loving, same gender environment. And by the way, the men with the men's work are getting enormous amount of a transformation as well. So we need our separate containers. When we went into that retreat that I'm talking about, like only a few of us women had the best time in our lives because we have healed a lot of this trauma. So we were open to receive the love. We were open to receive the adoration. We were open to play. And a lot of women come with a lot of armor. They either don't feel their bodies, they are afraid of men, or they want to fight men. And it just, what happens is a lot of unhappiness, to put it in easy words. They want connection, yet there is a lot of blockages.
And part of that is because the wounding can create disconnection from one's own heart, because there's unresolved pain, unresolved and hidden and suppressed anger. And what I've noticed, I do work with men and women, though primarily women. I find that when I hold most of my retreats, like the upcoming retreat in Greece, for example, it's only women because one, we get to create the temple environment, and two, because when we're working with men or women, the beliefs are so different. The way we approach the body is so different. And therefore, to try to do it all together in a co-ed environment, I've done it. I've led co-ed retreats, but it's not, we can't go to the same depth that we can when we're focusing on how one biological sex has been affected by these beliefs and this dissociation that we can when we're focusing on one at a time. And when we are coming into our power, let's say for women specifically, though men have to do this in relation to women as well, so much accumulated rage can keep us from connecting with the opposite sex because of the unhealed trauma, not only individually, but collectively. And in order to come back into union, say between man and woman, and we're going to speak to heterosexual here just for the sake of this conversation, though it can apply to all sorts of different relationships, is that if we want to come back into this union, we have to heal and see that rage and heal and see the grief underneath the rage of the disconnection and how that disconnection has been perpetuated in order to purify the heart, which is a huge aspect of a woman's power, is the purification of the heart that has to happen so that, as you said, Sunny, you can truly be seen and receive the love and see him for who he is and not the projections of the wounded masculine, but his soul is who you're connecting with.
Absolutely. A lot of people look at the person and they just lay all their projections on them instead of actually seeing the person. So we cannot even see each other. And talk about the heart. In Tantra essence, we start with the heart. This is the number one for women. We cannot go into sexuality or into any intuition if the heart is locked, if the heart is with heart walls. So that is the first thing, and being able to receive, again, in that retreat, we had like two types of women. The first type, we were doing exercises where we were first 3 times receiving from men and then 3 times giving to men. So the men are receiving next. And there were some women that were so comfortable in giving, right? We were taught you give, you give, you give, and receiving was so difficult. And then we had one gal, when it comes time to start giving to the men, she starts crying and breaking down. And I go and I'm like, what is happening? And she says, I have given all my life to men and I cannot give anymore. I hate this exercise. I cannot give. So again, coming from this place of total emptiness versus our fountain of love. So just finding out, like, where are you when somebody offers even a nice word, or somebody offers to take the bags for you, or somebody actually offers love. What do you do? What are your reactions? What is the conditioned way to respond to this?
And what you said with this woman is one, very common. And
Yeah.
two, it's because we are taught to give out of sacrifice. We're taught to give out of self-denial. And we are not taught that truly giving is the same as receiving. When we are giving from divine love, not conditional love, not obligation, and not duty, that the giving and receiving become one, and there is no difference. So the wounding of relationships is I give or I get, I give or I get. And the truth of divine love is I give, I receive, I receive, I give. There is no separation because the heart is so activated and attuned to this frequency of divine love. And it's from overflow. It's from this fountain. But that rage and that grief underneath that self-denial and self-sacrifice is what first has to be healed. I know that's a huge part when I work with women one-on-one or in retreat or in my online temple, Divine Feminine Power. That is a huge aspect of how we, and I believe you do a lot of this too, of how we come back into the self and work on this relationship, right? Because we have to heal these inner wounds so that we're not projecting. We have to heal the ways in which we're giving out of duty, as an example. We have to heal the ways in which we've separated from self, hidden aspects of self, rejected parts of self in order to be who others want us to be, right? All of these woundings, which do create trauma. And the dissociation from the body is in large part because we haven't yet been given the tools to go into the body to heal it. And one of the things that you said, I want us to really talk about is that the heart has to open first, 100%, because the heart opens the womb. And if we want to go into the body to reconnect with self and to heal this trauma, if the heart is not open, how can the healing happen? It can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And the other thing that is happening that I saw last week is that women come and they say, because this is the hurt, this is being afraid from men, and they're like, he was so mean to me, he did this to me, he's awful person, he's this and that. And yes, absolutely, to that obviously there are people who intentionally, hurt people, and we can dive into narcissism and everything else. But it is that role of the victim, entering and living in that role of the victim. And believe me, I have been for many years in that role. And once you are there, um, it takes a while of blaming the other in order to finally find your power. Find that you realize, I love this quote from, she says, nobody can make you inferior without your consent.
Exactly.
Um, so that is another wound that is so prevalent. Like, he did it, he was bad. And how do you see that? How do we get out of this wounding?
Because if we don't heal the wounding, then we're inflicting pain on the other, who's going to keep wounding. And we stay in a repetitive cycle of wounding. And it's wounding on wounding on wounding on wounding. And at some point, we have to rise above. At some point, we have to heal the wounding within the self, not projecting it. You heal, you change, you fix, right? That's so common in relationships because that's codependency. We've essentially been taught to have codependent relationships for millennia. you heal, you change, you fix, you. And healing from this wounding, whether it be perpetuated through sexual practices, right, that take us into more violence and more wounding and more disconnection from the heart, because usually you're not inflicting violence from your heart on another person. You're not whipping another person from a place of divine love. I mean, let's just be real. To wow, how do I come back into wholeness with myself? How do I rise above this wounding by healing this aspect of myself, by creating deeper connection, by loving these parts, by bringing all of this into my heart and allowing it to heal, allowing the wounds to dissolve so that I'm not projecting them, so that I'm not in this repetitive cycle. It's such a beautiful journey that I don't think is talked about enough.
Yeah, yeah. And I had to repeat so many times at this retreat. I said, it is when we are blaming, he did this to me. It's like drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. Because I was saying, you are not approving of what they did, but you are healing yourself. You are releasing the negative emotions that have accumulated. And of course, in Tantra, the beauty is that we have so many amazing practices. I mean, we beat so many pillows and we screamed so much and we danced and we embodied all kinds of emotions, positive and negative, as the women's emotional fluidity is one of our biggest gifts and powers. So it just takes practice after practice after practice to realize your power and to understand that when you change on the inside, the environment around you changes. I remember hearing this in the beginning and I'm like, no, he needs to change. And again, I must say that the only way is our own internal work, and then everything else changes.
In part because one, the reaction turns into a response. So there's no more ego to ego fighting. There's no more throwing, wounding and wounding. There's no more projection. There's self-responsibility and self-accountability. And the boundaries arise because I believe that boundaries come from anchoring into self. And so it's not that that person necessarily changes their behavior, but your response to it versus a reaction changes. Your capacity to focus on yourself and to heal and to have the boundary and to speak the truth changes, so that you no longer tolerate what you tolerated before, so that you say no when maybe you said yes, even though you felt a no inside. These are the ways that it starts to change, so that it does change the relationship. It doesn't mean it changes that person. They have to do that work themselves. And that's another wounding that's perpetuated. If I change, he will change. If I change, she will change. That's not necessarily the reality. What is the reality is that when you stop having a trauma response to somebody else's truth and you actually hear them, you might actually be able to communicate from a heart place and not keep banging your head against the wall, because you're hearing the other person, which can create connection where there was disconnection. And that's how it changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the biggest practices is this intentional listening. It's listening with the whole body. It's actually being present versus responding, conditionally, like, oh yeah, he's going to say that. And my response is going to be that, but actually hearing the other person. So there are so many tools that we use in order to transform, to bring out the things that are stuck inside, that we put in little boxes, actually, that, talking about deeper why you need. Sometimes people are like, yeah, sexuality, tantra, this is like an important part of your life. And we know that this is key, that this is key to your health, to your happiness, to your satisfaction in life, to your success, to everything, because those little boxes become diseases. Those little boxes are the ones that attract the same poison unless it's cleared out of your poison. I mean, the same situations, the same people, the same repetition, like we started, of this trauma response that we keep on going and we cannot heal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things I want to speak to is that when people have a lot of trauma that is unhealed, one of the ways of keeping oneself in a traumatized state is to seek external practices that cycle the trauma within themselves, that might be perpetuating violence, that might be perpetuating dissociation from the body, that might be perpetuating darker fantasies, for example, because that actually keeps them from having to face the real wound inside. Does that make sense? So one of the ways that people will avoid unconsciously actually healing and coming face to face with the wounds, the trauma, the dissociation inside is by trying to find practices that keep them in that traumatized state and keep them disconnected from the body, so they never actually go into the heart where the wounding resides. They never actually go into the body where the wounding resides. And so that's why these practices can be very dangerous, whether it be the BDSM, whether it be fantasy work, whether it be play parties, or even co-ed tantra before this work is done internally, because it keeps one in that state of dissociation. Instead of doing the inner work, it really requires to come into the inner union, the known boundaries and the healing of the wounds and the grief, which don't need to be projected on others and don't need to be relived. The body needs to attune to a new frequency and a new vibration and a new connected state. And only love can bring us back into connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love for us to talk about the love that happens in those women's retreats. Like, it's amazing as we start seeing the goddess, the divinity, the beauty in each other. The sisterhood wound is also a big one. Women come with this competitive mindset, especially in mixed settings. So thank goodness with the goddess retreats, with the women's retreats that we do, when there is just women, we are actually relaxing and being able to receive the unconditional love from one another, because we women are such all people, but in women I see this divinity and this incredible unconditional love and care toward one another. Everything drops, and when we experience it once, we never forget it, and we become different. We drop the sisterhood wound, and just realize the beauty in each of us and the uniqueness, and that there is plenty of everything around.
Yeah, it's true. When I think about, I led a retreat in Greece last year to connect with ancient goddess temples and sacred sites and to work with the energy, and I'm leading another one this fall. And one of the things that the women said, every woman walked away very transformed and having a very new relationship with her body, not only as with her own body, but with the body of the earth, and the womb, really connecting their womb with the womb of the earth. But they all said, wow, I know what it's like to live in a temple now. I imagine what this was like when women used to be together in the temples, when they were in sisterhood and connection, and the deep, loving connections that were formed, that we get to form when we're held in safe space, when we're held in sacred space, when we are given the opportunity to let that armoring go and to put the shields and swords down and actually see each other for who we really are, which of course starts when we have the opportunity to deeply drop into oneself and one's own heart and one's own body. And I know that both of us, that's such a deep passion, is to help people connect to that deeper inner self and allow themselves to open into the love they are, so that there's this infinite flow. The competition, the comparison dissolves in the face of that love, so the true connection can happen. And it's miraculous. The results of that, really miraculous.
Absolutely. And we do also a lot of touch, a lot of massages, a lot of
in your workshops, let me just specify.
Yes.
I don't do that in
Yes.
mine, but in yours.
I see. Yeah, because touch is also another thing, another one of those wounds that basically in our society, any touch is considered sexual. Even
Because
between
it
women,
became that way, which is
because
it's part of the
became that
wounding.
way.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
So again, another one of those is very like you can actually hug and touch for real and give through, because the arms and the hands are extension of the heart. So when you touch, you give that love. And when we speak into different affirmations through touch and massage, all the healing goes so deep, and most of the wounds just.
And let me speak to the safety piece. So one, yes, I think the wounding is that part of it is that we haven't been able to trust the difference between what is heartfelt touch, what is sexual touch, especially when there's unhealed trauma and unresolved trauma. One can have a difficult time feeling the difference. And also when we are in a group setting, it's so important that we are working on that inner safety, because that inner safety, that capacity, which for me, helping people create inner safety is such a cornerstone of my work with people. That inner safety, that inner connection, that inner trust allows us to open to deeper connection with others. And if we bypass that to find safety with someone else, we're again repeating the wounding, we're repeating the trauma. And I just want to mention that because we've been talking a lot about this wounding and this unhealed trauma and how it could show up. And one of the ways it can show up is not actually feeling safe, but allowing something to happen anyway without creating the internal safety first. And that's where the boundaries and the discernment and that body attunement have to come in as the primary focus, so that you can feel, is this a safe touch? Is this not a safe touch? And if it's not a safe touch, how do I then speak to that? What are my boundaries around that? Versus feeling I have to, or shutting down or dissociating in response to that external stimulus. Very, very important in the healing work. And as we start to wrap up, I want us to, we both offer retreats, we both work with people one-on-one. I want us to just follow up with how people can find us. And if you have any closing remarks for what someone can take away and begin to, if they know they have unresolved trauma, if they want to look more deeply at their shadow, at the projections, and take more responsibility for their own healing and relationships and sexuality, what's a takeaway? What's a practical step someone can do? Other than, of course, coming to one of our retreats or working with us.
Yes, because in the beginning, when there is a lot of confusion, in the beginning, when you are first starting to awaken, you first start seeing that there has to be some other way. There can be a lot of different voices, and you really can fall onto some healing practices that we have been talking about that are actually re-traumatizing.
Yes.
So of course, discernment and learning to discern is what we teach. But what you can do on like today, right now, as you're listening to us, this can be a very good exercise. You just put one hand on your lower belly and one hand on the heart. And maybe you can even close your eyes and just say, all this that I heard today, right now, is it like resonating with me? Is it making me come a little closer to the screen? Or maybe it's like pushing me away? Just how I feel about this, and just softening into your own wisdom, trusting yourself, because your body knows, your inner self knows. It just we have been uh, conditioned and layered on with all kinds of beliefs and systems and things that have not allowed us to connect with our inner wisdom. So that would be um, my advice for this.
Perfect way to wrap this up. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll have even more conversations in the future. So it's been such a pleasure to have you. And I'll put both of our website links below. We have gowithsunny.com.
Gowithsunny.com, and then gowithsunny.coach is my Instagram handle.
Okay, perfect. And mine's thepathtosovereignty.com and the Path to Sovereignty on Instagram. So we'll put all the links below. We both also have free offerings. I have a free 12 days of transformation that you can sign up for. It's a course that you can access. We'll take you deeper into your body, your thoughts, your beliefs, creating that safety, the boundaries. And then Sunny also has a free quiz that you can access if you want to mention that quickly.
Yes, the quiz is all about the feminine archetypes and helps you figure out which archetype are you leading in life and love, and then how the masculine archetypes are actually coming in to create a very balanced yin yang feminine masculine match. Because often I'll say the queens show up and they are looking for the king, and a lot of times there is like the way they are looking is very mismatched. So I help with that, but first take the quiz.
Perfect. All right. It's been such a pleasure. More to come in the future. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share this with anyone who might benefit from this deeper conversation so that they can come face to face and heal what's been keeping them stuck from experiencing what they truly desire in relationships and sexuality. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Soul Sovereignty Podcast.